She told the stranger in the worn coat that she wouldn't marry a man who pitied her. What she didn't know was that the man standing in her flower shop, asking for her hand with dirt under his fingernails and rain in his hair, was the vampire king who'd been searching the kingdom for someone who'd see him as anything other than a crown. The bell above the door chimed as another gust of November wind pushed its way into the shop, scattering loose petals across the wooden floor. Mira's fingers worked quickly, weaving white roses through baby's breath, creating a wedding bouquet for a bride she'd never meet. 3 more orders waited on the counter behind her, each one due before sunset, and her hands ached from the cold that seeped through the shop's thin walls. The east side of the city didn't get the same heating spells as the noble districts. Here, humans made do with fireplaces and extra blankets, while across the river, vampire lords lived in mansions that never knew winter's bite. She didn't hear him enter. The wind had been howling all morning, drowning out the bell's usual greeting. But she felt the shift in the air, that peculiar weight that came when a vampire entered a room full of living things. Mira's hand stilled on the roses. "Excuse me." The voice was quiet, almost apologetic. She turned, wiping her hands on her apron. The man standing just inside the doorway didn't look like the usual vampire customers, who sometimes wandered in from the upper districts, slumming for exotic human-grown flowers. He wore a coat that had seen better decades, dark wool patched at the elbows. His boots were scuffed, laces frayed, rain dripped from his black hair onto his shoulders, and he made no move to shake it off, as if he'd forgotten he was wet. But his eyes gave him away. All vampires had that ageless quality, but his were different. Storm gray, old in a way that spoke of centuries, not decades. "Can I help you?" Mira asked, returning to her bouquet. She'd learned long ago not to stare at vampire customers. They didn't like being reminded they were different, and she needed their money too much to risk offense. "I need flowers," he said, then seemed to realize how obvious that sounded in a flower shop. He cleared his throat. "For a proposal." Mira's hands continued their work, tucking another rose into place. "Congratulations. What did you have in mind?" "Red roses are traditional." The man stepped closer, and she caught his scent, rain and something darker, like old libraries and older secrets. "Not for someone else," he said. "For you." The baby's breath slipped from her fingers. She looked up, really looked at him for the first time. He wasn't handsome in the way of the vampire nobles who occasionally passed through her street, all sharp cheekbones and calculated grace. His face was strong, weathered, with a scar cutting through his left eyebrow that spoke of old violence. He held himself carefully, as if afraid his presence might break something fragile. "I don't understand," Mira said slowly. The man reached into his coat and pulled out a small box. His hands, she noticed, had dirt under the fingernails. He works with his hands, she thought. Whatever he is, he's not idle nobility. "I've been coming to your shop for 3 months," he said. "Always when you're busy. Always when you don't notice. I've watched you create beauty from broken stems and dying blooms. I've seen you give free flowers to the widow on the corner. Lie about having extras when we both know you needed that money. I've heard you sing to your plants when you think no one's listening." The box opened. Inside sat a ring, simple silver with a small sapphire that caught the gray afternoon light. "Marry me." The words hung in the air between them like frost. Mira stared at the ring, then at the stranger, then back at the ring. Something hot and sharp twisted in her chest, part anger, part something she didn't want to name. "You don't even know me," she said quietly. "I know enough." "You know what you've observed through a window," Mira corrected, her voice steady even as her hands trembled. "You don't know that I'm afraid of deep water, or that I can't read music, or that I talk in my sleep. You don't know about the scar on my shoulder from when I fell out of a tree at 7, or that I hate mushrooms, or that my mother died, thinking I'd failed her." The man's expression didn't change, but something flickered in those storm-gray eyes. You're right, he said. Then why? Mira demanded. Why would you ask a stranger to marry you? Is this some kind of vampire custom I don't understand? A game? Because I'm human, you think I'm desperate enough to accept? The words came faster now. Months of exhaustion and frustration pouring out. I know what I look like to you. Poor. Struggling, working 16-hour days in a shop that barely keeps the lights on. But I'm not so desperate that I'll marry a man who pities me. I don't pity you, the man said quietly. Then what? Mira challenged. Love at first sight? Some romantic notion about the beautiful florist? Because let me save you the disappointment. I'm not beautiful. I'm tired. My hands are scarred from thorns. I smell like fertilizer more often than perfume, and I haven't had a full night's sleep in 3 years. The man was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice carried weight, like stones dropping into deep water. I don't pity you. I admire you. There's a difference. Mira laughed, but there was no humor in it. You admire me enough to marry me, but not enough to court me first? To learn my name before you learned my schedule? The ring box closed with a soft snap. You're right, the man said. I've done this wrong. But the offer stands. Think about it. He set the box on the counter, among the scattered rose petals and green wire. Then he turned toward the door. Wait, Mira called. He paused, hand on the doorframe. What's your name? The man looked back at her, rain still dripping from his hair, that ancient weariness in his eyes. Does it matter? To me, yes, Mira said. If you're going to propose to a stranger, at least have the courtesy to tell her who you are. Something almost like a smile crossed his face, sad and knowing. Aldrich, he said. Just Aldrich. He left before she could respond, the bell chiming his departure. The ring box sat on her counter like an accusation. Mira stared at it for a long moment, then shoved it into her apron pocket and returned to her work. Her hands shook as she wove the final roses into place. Just Aldrich, she muttered to the empty shop, as if any vampire was ever just anything. The widow appeared an hour before closing, as she did every Thursday, her black shawl pulled tight against the cold. Mira had her usual bouquet ready, white chrysanthemums wrapped in brown paper. For your husband, she said, pressing the flowers into the old woman's weathered hands. The widow's eyes grew wet. Child, you can't keep giving these away. You need the money. I have enough, Mira lied. The widow left, and Mira locked the door behind her, flipping the sign to closed. The shop fell into blessed silence. She allowed herself 5 minutes, just 5, to lean against the counter and close her eyes. The ring box pressed against her hip through the apron pocket, a constant reminder of the afternoon's strangeness. What kind of man proposed to a woman whose name he didn't know? What kind of vampire watched from shadows for 3 months and called it courtship? Mira pulled the box from her pocket and opened it. The sapphire caught the lamplight, throwing tiny blue shadows across the counter. It was beautiful. She'd give him that. Simple but real, not the gaudy displays vampire nobility usually favored. Practical, almost. Like something chosen by someone who understood that beauty didn't require excess. She snapped it shut and shoved it into the drawer beneath the register, under the ledger where she tracked her debts. Out of sight, out of mind. Except it wasn't. As she cleaned the shop, sweeping scattered petals and wiping down the work counter, she kept thinking about his eyes. Storm gray and old. So old and sad, she realized now. There had been loneliness in them, the kind that came from being surrounded by people who couldn't see you. She recognized it, because she saw the same look in her own mirror every morning. Stop it, she told herself aloud. He's a vampire. Rich enough to buy rings, privileged enough to think he can purchase a wife like he'd purchase flowers. It doesn't matter if he looked sad. Everyone's sad about something. She finished closing the shop and climbed the narrow stairs to her apartment above. 2 rooms, barely heated. But hers. The rent ate most of her profit. But she didn't have to share walls with anyone. Didn't have to explain the dirt under her fingernails or the flowers she sometimes brought home to experiment with. Tonight's experiment waited on her tiny kitchen table, a pot of moonflowers she'd been trying to cultivate for 6 months. They were supposed to bloom only under direct moonlight, rare and valuable, sought after by vampire alchemists for their properties. If she could grow them successfully, she could charge 10 times what she made on roses. The problem was keeping them alive. Every batch died within weeks, their silver petals browning and falling despite her best efforts. Mira knelt beside the pot, checking the soil moisture, examining each stem for signs of disease. The plants looked healthy, their leaves a deep green, but she knew better than to trust appearances. Moonflowers were temperamental, requiring specific conditions she couldn't quite replicate in her small apartment. "You need moon water," a voice said from behind her. Mira spun, her heart hammering. Aldrich stood in her kitchen doorway as if he'd materialized from shadow. The worn coat was gone, replaced by a simple dark shirt, but he looked just as out of place in her cramped space as he had in her shop. "How did you get in here?" Mira demanded, grabbing the nearest thing to a weapon, which unfortunately was a wooden spoon from her dish rack. "The window," Aldrich said, nodding toward her kitchen window that she knew for a fact she'd locked. "I apologize for the intrusion. You can't just break into someone's home," Mira hissed, brandishing the spoon with more confidence than she felt. "I didn't break anything," Aldrich said mildly. "The lock simply opened." "That's still breaking in," Mira snapped. "Get out before I scream. The building's full of humans. They'll come running." He didn't move. "Your moonflowers are dying because you're using regular water. They need water that's been charged under a full moon for 3 consecutive nights. The minerals in tap water poison their roots slowly." Mira lowered the spoon slightly. "How do you know that?" "I grow things," Aldrich said. "In my gardens. I have moonflowers that have bloomed for 50 years. Your plants are young. Maybe 6 months? They're entering their first mature bloom cycle. That's when they're most vulnerable." Despite herself, Mira looked at the pot. "Can they be saved?" Aldrich stepped closer, and she let him, curiosity overriding caution. He knelt beside the moonflowers, his hands hovering over the leaves without touching. "Yes," he said, "but you'll need to transplant them tonight, before the damage spreads to the roots. Use moon water if you have it. Rainwater if you don't. Add crushed eggshells to the soil for calcium. They're hungry." "I don't have moon water," Mira admitted. "I don't have crushed eggshells either. I barely have regular water most days." Aldrich stood. "I can bring you both. Tomorrow, along with proper soil and a grow lamp that mimics moonlight. Consider it an apology for my presumptuous proposal." "Why?" Mira asked. "Why do you care if my flowers live or die?" The vampire was quiet for a moment, his storm-gray eyes studying her face. "Because you care," he said simply. "And because very few people in this world create beauty when they could simply survive. You do both." It wasn't an answer, not really, but something in his voice made Mira's chest tighten. She set down the wooden spoon. "If you bring those things tomorrow, come to the front door," she said. "Use the bell like a normal person." Aldrich's mouth quirked. Almost a smile. "As you wish." He moved toward the window. "Wait," Mira called. He paused. "Why moonflowers? Of all the plants you could notice, why these?" "Because they bloom in darkness," Aldrich said. "And they're beautiful precisely because they're difficult to keep alive. Like some people." Then he was gone, dropping from her second-story window as if height meant nothing to him. Mira rushed to the window and looked down, but the alley below was empty, rain puddling in the cobblestones. She locked the window, checked it twice, then returned to her moonflowers. In the lamplight, she could see what she'd missed before. The edges of the leaves were indeed beginning to brown, so subtle she'd mistaken it for shadows. He was right. They were dying, and she hadn't even noticed. She filled a bowl with rainwater she'd collected last week, gently tipped the pot, and began the delicate work of transplanting. Her hands moved with practiced precision, separating roots from poisoned soil, whispering apologies to the plants for her ignorance. It was past midnight when she finished. The moonflowers sat in their new pot, temporary home until Aldrich brought the promised supplies. If he brought them. For all she knew, he'd been lying, playing some elaborate vampire game she didn't understand. But she didn't think so. There had been genuine knowledge in his voice when he talked about the flowers. And something else. Recognition, maybe. Like he saw in the struggling plants, something he understood on a level deeper than gardening. Mira washed the soil from her hands and fell into bed without bothering to change clothes. Sleep came quickly. But her dreams were full of storm-gray eyes and flowers that bloomed in darkness. Beautiful, because they refused to die easy. Aldrich appeared at precisely 9 the next morning, arms laden with supplies. Mira watched through the shop window as he struggled with the door, trying to balance 2 bags, a large box, and what appeared to be a small lamp without dropping anything. She considered letting him struggle, payback for the window intrusion, but her curiosity won. She opened the door. "You came," she said, unable to keep the surprise from her voice. "I said I would," Aldrich replied, carrying everything to her work counter. The box contained soil, rich and dark, smelling of minerals and something faintly sweet. The bags held crushed eggshells, carefully ground to powder, and 3 large bottles of what he claimed was moon water, sealed with wax. The lamp was stranger, a glass globe that emitted a soft silver light when he touched a rune on its base. "This will give them the spectrum they need," Aldrich explained. 4 hours at night, no more. Or you'll force blooming before they're ready. Mira picked up one of the bottles, holding it to the light. It looked like ordinary water, perhaps slightly clearer. "How do I know this is really moon water and not just expensive tap water?" Aldrich's expression didn't change. "You don't. You'll have to trust me." "Trust," Mira repeated. "The thing you're asking me to do without earning it. I'm trying to earn it now," Aldrich said quietly, "by bringing you what you need to keep something you love alive." "That's not trust," Mira countered. "That's bribery." "What's the difference?" Aldrich asked, and she couldn't tell if he was genuinely confused or testing her. "Intent," Mira said. "Bribery expects something in return. Trust is given freely, without guarantee of reward." She met his eyes. "Which is this?" Aldrich was silent for a long moment. "I don't know," he admitted finally. "I'm not good at this." "At what?" "Normal human interaction." He said it without self-pity, just stating a fact. "I've spent too long being what people expect instead of what I am. Now I'm trying to be honest, and I don't know the rules." Despite herself, Mira felt something soften in her chest. "What do people expect you to be?" "Powerful," Aldrich said. "Distant. Unfeeling. And what are you?" "Tired," he said. "Very, very tired." The words hung between them like a confession. Mira recognized their weight. She'd said similar things to her mirror, on nights when the orders wouldn't stop and her hands wouldn't heal, and the widow appeared expecting free flowers Mira couldn't afford to give. "Help me transplant them," she said, nodding toward the moonflowers she'd brought downstairs that morning. "If you're going to give advice, you should see if it works." They worked in comfortable silence, Mira's hands and Aldrich's moving in unspoken coordination. He was right about his gardening knowledge. He knew exactly how deep to bury roots, how much space each plant needed, how to firm soil without compacting it. His hands were gentle, reverent even, treating the moonflowers like precious things worth saving. "You really do grow things," Mira said as they worked. "In your gardens." "Where are these gardens?" Aldrich's hands paused, just for a moment. "Far from here, on the other side of the river." "The Noble District," Mira guessed. "So you are rich." He didn't answer, which was answer enough. She felt old resentment flare. "This is a game to you, isn't it? Slumming with the poor human florist. Seeing how the other half lives." "No," Aldrich said sharply, the first time she'd heard heat in his voice. "This is the least like a game I've ever played." Then what is it? Mira demanded. Why are you really here? Why marriage? Why me? Aldrich set down the trowel and looked at her directly. Because 3 months ago, I watched you give your last copper to a street child so he could buy bread. Then you went upstairs and ate stale crackers for dinner. Because you sing to plants and apologize when you have to trim them. Because you're kind when kindness costs you, and strong when strength would be easier to abandon. Those aren't reasons to marry someone, Mira said. Those are reasons to admire them from a distance. I've done that, Aldrich said. 3 months of admiring from a distance. It didn't make the loneliness less. You think marrying me would fix your loneliness? Mira asked. Incredulous, I think, Aldrich said carefully, that you understand it. And understanding is rarer than love. Mira sat back on her heels, soil under her fingernails, this strange vampire before her saying things that shouldn't make sense but somehow did. You're asking me to trust you when I don't know you, she said. When you won't even tell me your full name, or where you really live, or why you're so desperately lonely that you'd propose to a florist you've been stalking. I wasn't stalking, Aldrich protested weakly. You were watching me without my knowledge for 3 months, Mira said. That's stalking. Aldrich had the grace to look embarrassed. You're right. I apologize. It seemed less invasive than introducing myself as a stranger and asking to court you. It's more invasive, Mira corrected. At least a normal introduction gives me choice. Choice, Aldrich repeated, as if testing the word. You want choice? Yes, Mira said firmly. I want to choose who I spend time with, who I trust, who I potentially love. You can't just decide we're meant for each other and expect me to agree because you bring nice gardening supplies. The moonflowers sat between them, repotted and gleaming with health in their new soil. Aldrich studied them for a long moment. Teach me, he said finally. What? Teach me how to court you properly, Aldrich said. I clearly don't know how. You're the first person in a very long time who's been honest with me about what I'm doing wrong. So teach me. Make me earn your trust the right way. Mira stared at him. You're serious? Completely, Aldrich said. Give me rules. Tell me what's acceptable and what's invasive. Let me try again. Properly this time. It was absurd, teaching a centuries-old vampire how to court her like he was a schoolboy learning mathematics. But there was something genuine in his request, a humility she hadn't expected from someone of his obvious power and wealth. 1 month, she said. You get 1 month to court me properly. No more watching from windows, no more breaking into my home. You want to see me, you ask. You want to know something about me, you inquire directly. And at the end of the month, I'll give you an answer about your proposal. Aldrich's entire demeanor shifted, something like hope lighting his storm gray eyes. 1 month, he agreed. And the rules? No gifts worth more than a day's wages, Mira said, ticking them off on her fingers. No using vampire powers to impress me. No lies, even kind ones. And you have to tell me 3 true things about yourself every time we meet. 3 true things, Aldrich repeated. Not 3 comfortable things. 3 true ones. The first week was awkward. Aldrich appeared at her shop every afternoon at 4, precisely when her lunch orders slowed and before her evening rush began. He brought small things, carefully chosen to honor her price limit. A packet of rare seeds one day, claimed to grow flowers that changed color with the phases of the moon, a book of pressed flowers the next, each one labeled in careful script with its healing properties. On the 3rd day, he brought nothing but himself and asked if he could watch her work. Mira agreed, setting him on the stool near the window while she assembled a funeral arrangement. White lilies and forget-me-nots, symbols of remembrance and true love. Her hands worked the stems into a cascade, each flower placed with deliberate care. Why did you become a florist? Aldrich asked. 3 true things, Mira reminded him. You first. Aldrich was quiet for a moment, gathering his truths. I haven't slept properly in 17 years, he said. Every time I close my eyes, I dream of failures I can't fix. That's 1. 2, he continued. I own a library with 10,000 books, and I've read them all, some of them dozens of times. But I can't remember the last time words surprised me or made me feel something new. And 3? Mira prompted, not looking up from her work. I proposed to you because you're the first person in decades who looked at me and saw a man instead of a title, Aldrich said. Even though you didn't know what that title was. Mira's hand stilled on the lilies. What title? King, Aldrich said quietly. I'm the Vampire King. The flowers slipped from her fingers. She turned slowly, studying his face for signs of jest. He wasn't smiling. You're lying, she said. As part of your rules, I can't lie. Aldrich reminded her. Even kind ones. Mira sat down hard on her work stool, the world tilting sideways. The Vampire King. She'd rejected the Vampire King's marriage proposal and called him a stalker to his face. She'd threatened him with a wooden spoon. Oh gods, she whispered. I'm going to be executed. No. Aldrich said quickly. No, that's not. I would never. He moved toward her, then stopped. Remembering boundaries. Mira, please. I'm not telling you this as a threat. I'm telling you because you asked for truth. And this is mine. Why didn't you tell me before? Mira demanded. Because you treated me like a person, Aldrich said. Do you know how rare that is? Everyone I meet sees the crown before they see me. You saw a strange man in a worn coat making a presumptuous offer. You rejected me based on my behavior, not my status. It was the most honest interaction I've had in years. So you lied by omission, Mira said. I said my name was Aldrich, which is true, the king said. I just didn't include the rest of it. That's still lying, Mira argued. By your rules, yes, Aldrich admitted. I apologize. It won't happen again. Mira stood, pacing the small shop. The Vampire King. In her shop, courting her. It was insane. This changes things, she said. It doesn't have to, Aldrich replied. Yes, it does, Mira insisted. You're not just some wealthy vampire. You're the king. I'm nobody. A struggling florist from the east side who can barely pay rent. You understand why your proposal is insane now, right? I understood it was unconventional, Aldrich said, but not insane. Mira laughed, high and slightly hysterical. Unconventional is proposing after 3 dates. Insane is a king proposing to a human commoner he's been watching through windows. The rules don't allow for someone like me to marry someone like you. What rules? Aldrich asked. Mine? Because I make those. And they say I can marry whomever I choose. Society's rules, Mira said. Your court's rules. The ones that say humans are lesser and kings don't fall in love with florists. I don't care about those rules, Aldrich said simply. You should, Mira countered. Because even if you don't, everyone else does. Your nobles, your advisors, your entire kingdom. They'll destroy me for daring to reach above my station. Is that why you're refusing me? Aldrich asked. Because you're afraid of what others will think? I'm refusing you because it's ridiculous, Mira said. Because we don't know each other. Because marriage isn't a solution to loneliness. It's a commitment that requires foundation and trust and time. All things your rules are meant to build, Aldrich pointed out. You gave me 1 month to court you properly. I'm trying. Does your month include planning to make me queen? Mira demanded. Because that's what would happen if I said yes. I'd go from arranging flowers to ruling a kingdom. Do you know how unprepared I am for that? Aldrich was quiet for a long moment. What if I abdicated? What? Mira said, shocked. What if I gave up the crown? Aldrich said, passed it to my counsel and walked away. Would you consider me then, without the title? You can't just give up being king, Mira said. People depend on you. Exactly, Aldrich said. Hundreds of thousands of people who need me to be strong and wise and perfect, who need me to never show weakness or doubt or humanity. It's exhausting. That's not a reason to abandon them, Mira argued. It's a reason to find support, Mira said. Someone to share the burden with. Someone who understands that strength includes asking for help. Like a partner? Aldrich asked quietly. Like a friend first, Mira corrected. Then maybe, someday, if we both choose it, something more. Aldrich nodded slowly. So the month continues. The month continues, Mira agreed. But no more secrets. If there are other titles or positions or responsibilities I should know about, tell me now. I'm the king, Aldrich said. I have a mother who's ill. A kingdom that's struggling with food shortages because the last 3 harvests failed. A council that fights constantly about whether to go to war with the southern territories, and a personal garden where I grow things because it's the only place I can create life instead of managing death. Mira absorbed this. Your mother's ill. How ill? Dying, Aldrich said bluntly. The healers give her 3 months. Maybe less. She's been asking to meet whoever I choose to marry, which is part of why I was so forward with my proposal. I wanted her to meet you before she goes. You wanted your dying mother to meet the woman who rejected you? Mira asked. I wanted her to meet the woman who made me feel human again, Aldrich corrected. Whether you accept me or not, you've already given me something I'd lost. Hope that connection was still possible. Mira felt tears prick her eyes and blinked them back. What's wrong with your mother? The wasting sickness, Aldrich said. It's common in very old vampires. The body slowly forgets how to regenerate. Healers have tried everything. Blood transfusions, spells, rare herbs. Nothing works. Is it painful? Very, Aldrich said. Though she hides it well. She's always been strong. Mira thought of the widow who came every Thursday, still buying flowers for a husband 40 years dead. Thought of her own mother, who'd worked herself to death trying to keep their small flower cart running after Mira's father left. Thought of how much she'd wanted someone to help carry that burden. Someone to see her mother's strength instead of just her struggle. I might know something, she said quietly. What? Aldrich asked. There's a flower, Mira said slowly. Moonveil bloom. It's rare. Almost extinct. My grandmother used to tell stories about it. She claimed it could restore what was lost, heal what was thought unhealable. But it only grows in one place, and no one successfully cultivated it in 2 centuries. Where? Aldrich asked urgently. The Shadow Caves, Mira said. In the northern mountains. But they're forbidden territory. Sealed by your grandfather after the cave vampire uprising. No one's been inside in over 100 years. I could unseal them, Aldrich said. You're the king. And I'm telling you it's suicide, Mira argued. The caves are full of feral vampires who fled there after the war. They'll kill anyone who enters. Even you. What if you came with me? Aldrich asked. Mira stared at him. Absolutely not. You know plants, Aldrich reasoned. You'd recognize the moonveil bloom. I'd just be stumbling around in the dark looking for something I've only seen in paintings. I'd be stumbling around in the dark dying, Mira corrected. I'm human, 1 feral vampire and I'm done. I'd protect you, Aldrich said. With your life? Mira asked. Because that's what it would cost. Going into those caves would be a death sentence for both of us. We're strangers who've known each other a week. You're not dying for me. And I'm not letting you. Aldrich's expression shifted, something harder settling into his features. Then I'll go alone. And I'll stop you, Mira said. I'll go to your council and tell them their king is planning a suicide mission. They'll lock you in your palace for your own good. You'd betray my confidence? Aldrich asked, sounding more curious than angry. To save your life? Yes, Mira said firmly. That's what friends do. They stop each other from making stupid decisions based on grief. Aldrich sat down on the workstool, suddenly looking every one of his centuries. My mother is dying. There has to be something I can do. There is, Mira said gently. You can be with her. You can make her remaining time peaceful instead of spending it on impossible quests. That's not enough, Aldrich said. It never is, Mira agreed. But it's what we have. When my mother died, I spent her last month trying to find money for treatments we couldn't afford instead of sitting with her. I was working triple shifts, begging healers, selling everything we owned, and you know what she said to me the night before she passed? What? Aldrich asked. I wish you'd just held my hand, Mira said, her voice breaking. That's all she wanted. My presence, not my desperation. I didn't understand until it was too late. Aldrich was quiet for a long moment. I'm sorry, he said finally, for your loss. And I'm sorry for yours, Mira replied. But please don't make it worse by dying trying to prevent it. What would you do? Aldrich asked. In my position. Mira considered. I'd ask my mother what she wanted. Not what I wanted for her, but what would bring her peace. Maybe she doesn't want to be saved. Maybe she just wants her son to be happy. I can't be happy while she's dying, Aldrich said. Then be present, Mira suggested. Be honest. Tell her you're scared. Let her comfort you instead of the other way around. That's what parents want at the end, to know their children will be okay without them. Aldrich's hands clenched. You're asking me to give up. I'm asking you to let go of control, Mira said. There's a difference. The bell above the door chimed. A customer entered, a young human woman looking for anniversary flowers. Mira composed herself quickly, smiling as she moved to help. Aldrich remained on the stool, watching as Mira guided the woman through options, asking about her partner's favorite colors, their shared memories, what emotions she wanted the flowers to convey. It was a masterclass in empathy, Mira translating abstract feelings into concrete blooms. When the woman left with a bouquet of yellow roses and purple irises, Aldrich spoke. You do that naturally. What? Mira asked, cleaning up the scattered stems. See what people need instead of what they ask for, Aldrich said. She came in wanting something impressive. You gave her something meaningful. That's just good business, Mira said. No, Aldrich replied. That's gift. Most people can't read emotional needs that quickly. You do it without thinking. Mira shrugged. I grew up poor. You learn to read people when survival depends on understanding what they really want versus what they're willing to pay for. Teach me, Aldrich said suddenly. Teach you what? How to read people like that, Aldrich explained. How to see past what they present to what they need. I'm the king. People perform for me constantly. I've forgotten how to tell the difference between genuine emotion and political theater. That's not something you can teach in a month, Mira said. Then teach me the basics, Aldrich pressed. Add it to our arrangement. I court you. You teach me how to be human again. I'm not a teacher, Mira protested. You're exactly a teacher, Aldrich countered. You just taught that woman about flower language without her realizing she was being educated. You teach your plants how to grow by singing to them. Teaching is just another form of care, and you're exceptional at care. Mira felt heat rise in her cheeks. Stop doing that. Doing what? Saying things that sound like compliments but cut deeper. Aldrich tilted his head. Is that a bad thing? It's uncomfortable, Mira admitted. I'm not used to being seen that clearly. Now you understand why I proposed, Aldrich said quietly. Because that's how you made me feel. Seen. And it's terrifying and wonderful and completely worth the risk of rejection. They looked at each other across the shop, surrounded by flowers and afternoon light, two lonely people trying to learn each other's language. Fine, Mira said. I'll teach you. But lesson 1 starts now. What is it? Aldrich asked. Stop trying to fix everything, Mira said. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is acknowledge you can't control outcomes. Just be present with the pain. Aldrich absorbed this. That's a terrible lesson. It's an essential one, Mira replied. The king stood. I should go. My mother will be wondering where I disappeared to. Aldrich, Mira called as he reached the door. He turned. Your 3 true things today. You said you haven't slept in 17 years. You own a library. And you proposed to me because I saw you as a man. That's only true things about facts. Tell me a truth about feelings, Aldrich considered. I'm terrified, he said. Of losing my mother, of failing my kingdom, of you realizing I'm not worth the effort of knowing. That's 3, Mira pointed out gently. I said 1. You got extras, Aldrich replied. Consider it interest on the debt I owe you for making me face reality. He left before she could respond. Mira returned to her moonflowers, which were thriving under the special lamp's glow. Silver buds were forming along the stems, tight and perfect. In a week, maybe 2, they'd bloom. She wondered if Aldrich's mother would live to see them. Wondered if there was any truth to her grandmother's stories about moonveil blooms and their healing properties. Probably not, she thought. Probably just fairy tales to comfort desperate people. But then again, a week ago she would have said vampire kings didn't court poor florists, and here she was, teaching one how to be human. Maybe impossible things were more possible than she'd believed. Aldrich's mother sent for Mira on the 10th day. The summons arrived via royal messenger, a vampire in formal livery who looked deeply uncomfortable delivering an invitation to someone living above a flower shop. Her Majesty, the Queen Mother, requests the pleasure of your company for afternoon tea, the messenger intoned. Tomorrow at 3. A carriage will be provided. Mira stared at the cream-colored card in her hand, embossed with a royal seal that probably cost more than her monthly rent. I can't, she said. Her Majesty does not accept refusals, the messenger replied with practiced politeness. It's not a request. It's a royal summons. I don't have appropriate clothes, Mira tried. Accommodations will be made, the messenger said. The palace has an extensive wardrobe. Please be ready at 2:30. He left before Mira could protest further. She spent that night anxious and sleepless, imagining every possible disaster. The Queen Mother would hate her, would see immediately that Mira was common, uneducated, completely unsuitable for her son, would probably have Mira thrown out, or worse, politely destroyed with the kind of cutting courtesy only royalty could manage. The carriage arrived precisely at 2:30, gleaming black with gold trim. The driver, another vampire in royal colors, handed Mira up the steps as if she were made of glass. Inside, the seats were velvet, deeper and softer than any bed she'd ever slept in. The ride across the river into the noble district was surreal. Mira pressed her face to the window, watching her shabby neighborhood give way to broad boulevards and mansions behind iron gates. The palace appeared gradually, white stone and soaring towers that seemed to touch the sky. She'd seen it from a distance her entire life, but up close it was overwhelming, beautiful and terrifying in equal measure. A lady's maid met her at a side entrance, a vampire woman with kind eyes who introduced herself as Helena. She guided Mira through corridors that seemed to stretch forever, walls lined with portraits of stern-faced rulers and tapestries depicting ancient battles. The wardrobe room was larger than Mira's entire apartment. Helena selected a dress in deep green, simple but well-made, with long sleeves and a high collar that wouldn't look out of place at a merchant's gathering, but wouldn't embarrass in royal company. She'll like you, Helena said as she helped Mira with the buttons. The Queen Mother. She has good instincts about people. How do you know? Mira asked nervously. Because she specifically requested you come in your work clothes first, Helena said. Then asked me to find something that honored who you are instead of trying to transform you into who you're not. That's unusually thoughtful. She's an unusual woman, Helena agreed. The tea room overlooked the palace gardens, acres of carefully maintained grounds that made Mira's heart ache with professional envy. The Queen Mother sat in a chair by the window, wrapped in shawls despite the room's warmth. She was tiny, barely 5 feet, with white hair and eyes that had faded to pale gray. But her spine was straight, her posture regal even in obvious illness. "You must be Mira," the Queen Mother said. Her voice was soft, but carried authority. "Please, sit. Tell me about yourself." Mira sat on the indicated chair, hands folded to hide their trembling. "There's not much to tell, Your Majesty. I'm a florist. I grow things." The Queen Mother smiled. "My son grows things too." "Did he tell you that?" "Yes," Mira said. "He mentioned his gardens. He spends more time there than in council meetings," the Queen Mother said. "His advisors despair. They want a warrior king, and instead they got a gardener who happens to wear a crown." There was fondness in her voice, and something else. Pride mixed with worry. "He's lonely, isn't he?" Mira asked quietly. Desperately, the Queen Mother confirmed. "Has been for years, since his wife died." Mira's world tilted. "Wife? Aldrich was married? No one told me." "It was a long time ago," the Queen Mother said. 70 years. Political arrangement, no love involved. She died in childbirth along with the baby. Aldrich blamed himself, withdrew from everyone. I've been waiting for him to open his heart again. "And you think that's me?" Mira asked. The Queen Mother studied her with those pale eyes. "I think you're the first person in decades who's made him laugh. He came home yesterday and told me you threatened him with a wooden spoon when he appeared in your kitchen uninvited." She laughed, a sound like wind through old trees. "A wooden spoon against the Vampire King. That's magnificent." "He was trespassing," Mira said defensively. "Indeed he was," the Queen Mother agreed. "And you treated him exactly as he deserved. Do you know how rare that is? People spend so much time being afraid of what he can do, that they forget to hold him accountable for what he actually does." Mira relaxed slightly. "He told me you're ill." "Dying," the Queen Mother corrected gently. "Let's not dance around it. I have perhaps 2 months, maybe less." "I'm sorry," Mira said. "Don't be," the Queen Mother replied. "I've lived 4 centuries. That's more than enough time to accomplish what I needed." Her eyes sharpened. "But I worry about my son, about what happens to him when I'm gone." "He wants to save you," Mira said. "He mentioned some caves." "The shadow caves," the Queen Mother said, shaking her head. "Foolish boy. I've forbidden it 3 times, but he's stubborn. Gets it from his father." "You could forbid it as Queen Mother," Mira suggested. "Make it a royal command." "I could," she agreed. "But he'd go anyway. That's why I asked you here." "To ask you to stop him?" Mira guessed. "To ask you to go with him," the Queen Mother corrected. Mira nearly dropped her teacup. "Absolutely not. I'm not letting him die in those caves. And I'm certainly not dying with him." "What if there was a way to survive?" the Queen Mother asked. "What if I told you there's a safe path through the caves? One my husband discovered 60 years ago but never recorded officially." Mira set down her cup carefully. "Why didn't Aldrich's father use it?" "Because he sealed the caves for political reasons," the Queen Mother explained. "The council demanded it after the uprising, but he left the passage open, just in case. Told me about it before he died." "Why tell me and not Aldrich?" Mira asked. "Because Aldrich needs someone to share the burden," the Queen Mother said. "Someone who'll keep him grounded when his protective instincts override his common sense. Someone who knows plants well enough to identify the Moonveil bloom if it actually exists." "That someone isn't me," Mira protested. "I'm a florist from the East Side. I've never been on an adventure in my life." "Neither had I," the Queen Mother said, "when Aldrich's father took me from my flower stall and made me queen. But I learned, and you will too, if you choose to." Mira shook her head. "This is insane. You're asking me to risk my life for a flower that might not exist." To save a woman I just met. To help a man who proposed after watching me through windows. When you say it that way, it does sound unreasonable, the Queen Mother admitted. So let me say it differently. I'm asking you to give my son a chance to hope, not to save me. That's just the excuse. But to have a quest, a purpose, something to fight for beyond obligation. And I'm asking you to see if, in fighting for something together, you might discover whether this strange connection between you is real. The passage is hidden behind the old well in the eastern courtyard, the Queen Mother said, pulling a folded map from her shawl. This shows the safe route. Avoid the marked chambers. Those are where the ferals nest. Stay quiet, move quickly, and you should reach the deep gardens where the moonveil blooms without incident. Should, Mira repeated. That's not reassuring. Nothing about this is meant to be reassuring, the Queen Mother said. It's meant to be possible. There's a difference. She pressed the map into Mira's hands. I'm trusting you with my son's life. That's not a small thing. I haven't agreed to go, Mira reminded her. But you will, the Queen Mother said with certainty, because you understand what it means to watch someone you care about destroy themselves with helplessness. And because, whether you admit it or not, you care about Aldrich. I barely know him, Mira protested weakly. You know enough, the Queen Mother replied. Knowledge isn't just time spent. It's attention paid, and you've been paying attention. Or you wouldn't be here arguing with a dying woman about the sanity of cave exploration. Mira left the palace with the map burning a hole in her pocket, and her mind spinning. The Queen Mother had arranged for the carriage to take her home, but Mira asked to be let out at the river bridge. She needed to walk, to think, to process the impossible situation she'd somehow fallen into. The East Side welcomed her back with familiar grime and noise, street vendors hawking vegetables, children playing in puddles, the constant background hum of human life. Her life. Simple and safe, and utterly separate from vampire royalty and dying queens and forbidden caves. She could ignore the map, could tell Aldrich his mother had given her tea and sent her home, could continue their careful courtship for the remaining 3 weeks and then politely decline his proposal, returning to her flowers and her small apartment and her uncomplicated existence. Except it wasn't uncomplicated anymore. She'd seen Aldrich's loneliness, recognized it because it mirrored her own. She'd heard the Queen Mother's wisdom and understood the weight of watching someone you love fade away. She'd felt something shift in her chest when Aldrich talked about his gardens, something that whispered maybe, possibly, this could be real. Mira reached her shop to find Aldrich waiting on the step, still in his worn coat despite the afternoon warmth. He stood when he saw her. How did it go? My mother can be intimidating. She was lovely, Mira said, and terrifying. And she gave me this. She pulled out the map. Aldrich unfolded it, his expression cycling through confusion, recognition, and fury in rapid succession. She told you about the passage. She asked me to go with you, Mira confirmed. To keep you from doing something stupid alone. I can't ask that of you, Aldrich said. You're not asking, Mira pointed out. Your mother is. And before you start the noble self-sacrifice speech, let me be clear, I haven't decided yet. But I'm considering it, which should tell you how completely you've disrupted my rational thinking. Why would you even consider it? Aldrich asked. You said yourself it's suicide. It's less suicidal with a map, Mira said, and with someone who knows plants. If the moonveil bloom exists, I'd recognize it. You've never seen one, Aldrich said. How could you possibly? My grandmother kept a dried specimen, Mira explained. She showed it to me when I was 7, told me it was the rarest flower in the world. Silver petals with black veins, leaves that glow faintly in darkness. She said if I ever found one growing, I should protect it because magic like that doesn't come twice. Aldrich stared at her. Your grandmother had a moonveil bloom? Had, Mira emphasized, past tense. It crumbled to dust years ago, but I remember what it looked like. I remember everything about it, because she made it sound like a fairy tale. And now you want to chase that fairy tale into a cave full of monsters, Aldrich said. I want to help you help your mother, Mira corrected. There's a difference. Why? Aldrich demanded. Why would you risk your life for a woman you just met? Because she asked me to take care of her son, Mira said quietly. And because I know what it's like to fail at that. To be too late, too poor, too helpless to save someone you love. If there's even a chance this works, don't I have to try? Not if it costs your life, Aldrich argued. My life. My choice, Mira said firmly. You don't get to decide what I risk. They stood on her shop step, the late afternoon sun painting everything gold. Around them, the east side conducted its evening business. People heading home from work, vendors closing their stalls, the daily rhythm of survival. We'd leave tomorrow, Aldrich said. Before dawn, while the ferals are sleeping. They're nocturnal. The caves will be safer during daylight hours. How long would we be gone? Mira asked. 2 days, maybe 3, Aldrich estimated. Depends on how deep the Moonvale Gardens are. I'd need to close the shop, Mira said. Lose 3 days of income I can't afford to lose. I'll compensate you, Aldrich offered. No, Mira said sharply. This isn't a transaction. Either I go because I choose to or I don't go at all. Don't make it about money. Aldrich nodded slowly. You're right. I apologize. They were quiet for a moment. I'm afraid, Mira admitted. Of the caves? Aldrich asked. Of all of it, Mira said. The caves, your mother dying, this thing between us that's moving faster than I can process. I'm a florist. I arrange flowers and pay rent and live small. This is too big. Too fast. I'm afraid too, Aldrich confessed. Of losing my mother. Of leading you into danger. Of hoping for something I don't deserve. Maybe fear means it matters, Mira suggested. Maybe, Aldrich agreed. He reached for her hand, then stopped, remembering boundaries. May I? Mira nodded. His hand was cool. Careful. His grip gentle as if she might break. Thank you, he said, for considering this. For seeing past the crown to the desperate sun beneath. You're welcome, Mira replied. But Aldrich, if we do this, we do it together. No heroic sacrifices, no protecting me at the cost of yourself. We both come back or neither of us goes. Together, Aldrich echoed. I can agree to that. Then we leave at dawn, Mira said, the words coming out before she could reconsider. I'll pack supplies. You bring weapons, or whatever vampire kings bring to forbidden caves. Aldrich's expression was complex. Gratitude and fear and something tender all mixed together. I don't deserve you. You don't know me well enough to know what you deserve, Mira said. That's what this month is supposed to determine. Consider this an accelerated getting-to-know-you experience. They met at the Old Eastern well before sunrise, the sky still dark and starred. Aldrich wore black traveling clothes and carried a sword that looked like it had seen actual battle. Mira brought her leather gardening satchel packed with tools, a canteen, dried food, and the pressed Moonvale bloom her grandmother had left her, wrapped in silk. Ready? Aldrich asked. No, Mira said honestly. But let's go anyway. The passage opened exactly where the Queen Mother's map indicated, a narrow tunnel hidden behind loose stones in the well's foundation. Aldrich produced a torch that burned with cold silver light, some kind of magical flame that didn't smoke. He insisted Mira go first, claiming he needed to guard their rear. Really, she suspected, he wanted to keep her in sight. The tunnel sloped downward, rough-hewn rock that showed chisel marks from whoever had carved this path decades ago. The air grew colder as they descended, taking on that peculiar stillness of deep underground places. Mira's breath frosted in the torchlight. How far down does this go? She whispered. A mile, maybe more, Aldrich replied, equally quiet. The shadow caves are extensive, miles of chambers and passages. Most are unmapped. Stay close. They walked for what felt like hours but was probably less than one, the tunnel branching occasionally. Each time, Aldrich consulted the Queen Mother's map, choosing their path carefully. Once they heard sounds from a side passage, scraping and low growls that made Mira's skin crawl. Aldrich's hand went to his sword, but the sounds faded. They moved on. The tunnel finally opened into a vast chamber, the ceiling lost in darkness above them. Bioluminescent fungi grew in patches on the walls, casting eerie green light that barely penetrated the gloom. "This is the first marker," Aldrich said, pointing to a symbol carved into the rock. "We're on the right path." The chamber had 3 exits. According to the map, they needed the middle one, but as they approached, Mira noticed something wrong. The fungi near that entrance were dead, blackened and withered. "Plants don't die without reason," she said, stopping Aldrich with a hand on his arm. "Something killed these." "Disease?" Aldrich asked. "Or something passing through frequently enough to poison them," Mira suggested. "We should try a different route." "But the map," Aldrich started. "Maps can be wrong," Mira interrupted. "Trust me on this. Dead plants mean danger." They took the left passage instead, moving carefully. Mira was right. They heard the feral vampires before seeing them, their movements in the middle passage, hunting perhaps or patrolling. The left tunnel led deeper, colder but untraveled. After another hour, it rejoined the mapped route. "You have good instincts," Aldrich said. "You listen to plants," Mira replied. "I listen to what they tell me about their environment. It's not magic. It's observation." They continued deeper. The passages grew narrower, forcing them to walk single file. Twice, they had to squeeze through gaps that barely accommodated Aldrich's shoulders. Mira's claustrophobia threatened, but she focused on breathing, on putting one foot in front of the other, on the cool silver light of Aldrich's torch ahead. "Tell me about your wife," she said suddenly, needing distraction. Aldrich was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. "Her name was Celestine," he said finally. "We were married for political alliance. Her father controlled the southern territories. It was strategic, nothing more." "Did you love her?" Mira asked. "I tried," Aldrich said. "She was kind, intelligent, beautiful by any measure. But we were strangers who shared a title. We never learned each other's languages. What happened?" "She wanted a child," Aldrich explained. "Heirs to secure both our claims. Vampire pregnancies are dangerous. I wanted to wait, to build our relationship first." She insisted. The council supported her. I gave in, and she died because of it. "That wasn't your fault," Mira said gently. "It was my responsibility," Aldrich countered. "I was king. I should have protected her better." "You can't protect people from their own choices," Mira argued. "She wanted the child. That was her decision, and her death was the consequence," Aldrich said. "One I've lived with for 70 years. "Is that why you've been alone so long?" Mira asked. "Because you blame yourself?" "Because I couldn't bear to risk someone else," Aldrich admitted. "Couldn't face the possibility of failing another person I was supposed to protect." "Until you," Mira said. "Until you," Aldrich confirmed. "You're the first person who makes me want to risk it again." They emerged into another chamber, this one smaller but spectacular. Crystals grew from the ceiling like frozen waterfalls, refracting the torchlight into rainbow patterns across the walls. Water dripped somewhere in the darkness, a steady rhythm that echoed strangely. "The deep gardens should be close," Aldrich said, consulting the map. "One more passage, then we'll reach them." The final tunnel was different from the others. The walls weren't rough-hewn but smooth, almost polished, and growing along them, impossible in the darkness, were plants. Small, pale, feeding on minerals in the rock and the moisture in the air. Mira ran her fingers along them gently. "Cave flora," she murmured. "I've only read about these. They're beautiful." The tunnel opened into a chamber that stole her breath. It was a garden, Impossible and real. Bioluminescent moss covered every surface, providing soft blue-green light. An underground stream ran through the center, and along its banks grew flowers she'd never seen, adapted to eternal darkness. Silver ferns, black orchids, plants that had evolved in isolation for centuries. And there, growing in a cluster near the stream's source, were the moonveil blooms. She recognized them instantly, silver petals with black veins, exactly as her grandmother had described, but seeing them alive was different from holding a dried specimen. They glowed faintly, pulsing with some internal light that had nothing to do with photosynthesis. "There," Mira whispered, pointing. Aldrich moved forward, but she caught his arm. "Wait. Let me check first." She approached the moonveil blooms slowly, studying the soil they grew in, the rocks around them, the way they clustered together. Grandmother's notes said they were symbiotic with a specific fungus. Harvesting without the fungus killed the plant's healing properties. She knelt, examining the root structure carefully. "These are perfect," she said. "Mature, healthy, strong enough to transplant. How many do we need?" "For your mother's cure, probably 3, Mira estimated. 1 to make the medicine, 2 as backup in case the first fails. But I want to take more." "For what?" Aldrich asked. "To cultivate," Mira said. "These shouldn't stay here, hidden and forgotten. If they can heal the wasting sickness, people need access to them." She began the delicate work of harvesting, using her tools to extract each plant with its root ball and symbiotic fungus intact. Aldrich watched, holding the torch steady, occasionally asking questions. "Why that one and not this one?" "That one's stronger root development," Mira explained. "See how the leaves are slightly darker? That means better nutrient absorption." "And this one?" Aldrich asked, pointing to a smaller bloom. "Too young," Mira said. "It wouldn't survive transplanting. We leave it to grow, to seed, to keep the garden alive for whoever might need it next." They worked for hours, carefully extracting 12 blooms total. Mira wrapped each root ball in damp moss from the stream, packing them into her satchel with the care she'd use for a newborn. When finished, she sat back, exhausted and exhilarated. "We did it. We actually did it." "The hard part's done," Aldrich agreed. "Now we just have to get back to the surface alive." The return journey went smoothly until they reached the large chamber with 3 exits. Something had changed. The bioluminescent fungi that had provided light before were mostly dead now, leaving the space in deeper darkness. And in that darkness, things moved. Aldrich's hand went to his sword. "Stay behind me," he whispered. Mira clutched her satchel, the moonveil blooms suddenly feeling heavier, more precious. They'd risked everything for these plants. She couldn't let them be destroyed now. The feral vampires appeared at the edges of Aldrich's torchlight, pale figures with eyes that reflected the silver flame. There were at least 6, maybe more in the shadows. They moved wrong, twitchy and animal, all higher reasoning burned away by centuries in darkness. The one in front, larger than the others, stepped forward. It spoke, which surprised Mira. She hadn't thought ferals retained language. "King," it said, voice rasping. "We smell king blood." The others hissed, excited. Aldrich raised his sword. "I don't want to fight you. Stand aside and we pass peacefully." The large feral laughed, an unsettling sound. "King comes to our home, takes our flowers. Expect safe passage?" "No. You stay. You join. You become." Its eyes fixed on Mira. "Human stays too. Fresh. Young. We share." "Over my dead body," Aldrich said quietly, and there was something in his voice that made even the ferals hesitate. Ancient power. Barely leashed. The authority of a king who'd ruled for centuries. "I said stand aside," Aldrich repeated. "This is your only warning." The large feral snarled and lunged. Aldrich moved faster than Mira could track, his sword flashing in the torchlight. The feral's head left its shoulders before its body realized it was dead. The others attacked as one. Mira had never seen Aldrich fight before. It was terrible and beautiful, like watching a storm given form. He was efficient, no wasted movement, each strike precise and devastating. But there were too many, and more were coming from the side passages, drawn by the sounds of combat. "Mira, run!" Aldrich shouted, decapitating another feral. "Take the blooms and run." "I'm not leaving you," Mira yelled back. We agreed. Together or not at all. Aldrich drove his sword through a feral's chest, then used the body as a shield against two more. His expression was desperate. "You have to survive. My mother needs those plants. Your mother needs her son," Mira countered. She set down the satchel, protecting it with her body, and pulled out her gardening knife. It was small, meant for pruning, but it had a blade. "If you die, I die," she said firmly. "So we better both live." Something in Aldrich's face shifted. He'd been fighting defensively, trying to protect her while managing the ferals. Now he moved different, fighting his way to her side instead of keeping the battle distant. He reached her, pressed his back to hers. "How many?" Mira asked, trying to see in the darkness. "Too many," Aldrich admitted. His breathing was labored. "Mira, I need you to promise me something." "No deathbed promises," Mira interrupted. "We're not dying here. But if we do," Aldrich pressed. "Promise you'll tell my mother I tried. That I didn't give up. I'll tell her myself," Mira said. "After we survive. Now stop talking and start fighting." A feral lunged at her. Mira slashed with her small knife. More luck than skill, catching it across the eyes. It shrieked and recoiled. Aldrich used the moment to drive his sword through its heart. They were going to die here. Mira knew it with terrible clarity. There were too many ferals. They kept coming, and Aldrich was tiring despite his strength. But she'd meant what she said. She wouldn't leave him. If this was how it ended, at least they'd face it together. Then light exploded through the chamber. Not silver torchlight, but golden, warm, flooding every corner and driving back shadows. The ferals screamed, covering their eyes, stumbling away from the brightness. A voice rang out, female and commanding. "Stand down," by order of the Queen Mother. Into the chamber strode Helena, the lady's maid who'd dressed Mira for tea. Except she wasn't a maid at all. She wore armor, carried a sword that blazed with that golden light, and moved with the confidence of someone who'd seen 1,000 battles. Behind her came a dozen palace guards, all armed, all creating a protective perimeter. The ferals fled, unable to bear the light. Within moments the chamber was empty except for bodies and the Queen Mother's rescue party. Helena sheathed her sword, the golden light fading. "Your mother sent you," Aldrich said, not quite a question. Helena smiled. "She sent me 3 hours after you left. Said she had faith you'd find the blooms, but less faith in your survival skills." She wasn't wrong, Mira admitted, still shaking with adrenaline. Aldrich looked at Helena with new eyes. "You're not a lady's maid." "I'm captain of the Queen Mother's personal guard," Helena corrected. "Have been for 2 centuries. The maid thing is just my cover when she wants to assess people without them performing." "So you were spying on me?" Mira asked. "Evaluating," Helena said diplomatically. "Her Majesty wanted to know if you were brave enough to risk the caves." "Apparently you are." "Barely," Mira muttered. Helena organized the return journey with military efficiency. 2 guards carried Mira's satchel, treating the Moonveil blooms like the precious cargo they were. The rest formed a protective circle around Aldrich and Mira as they retraced their path to the surface. They emerged into dawn light that felt impossibly bright after the cave's darkness. Mira wanted to kiss the ground, to weep with relief, to collapse. Instead, she accepted the blanket Helena offered, and the carriage ride back to the palace. The Queen Mother waited in her chambers, looking smaller and frailer than before, but with her eyes bright with hope. "You found them?" she asked. Mira carefully unwrapped one of the Moonveil blooms, its silver petals still glowing faintly in the morning light. 12, she said. "Fresh," healthy, with their symbiotic fungus intact. The Queen Mother's hands trembled as she touched the petals. I never truly believed, she admitted. Even when I sent you the map, I thought perhaps I was sending you on a fool's errand because I couldn't bear to do nothing. It's not a cure yet, Mira cautioned. We need to prepare it correctly. My grandmother's notes have the recipe, but it's complicated. Involves moon water and specific timing. I'll get you whatever you need, Aldrich said. Alchemists. Equipment. Moon water by the barrel if necessary. Mira shook her head. I need my shop. My tools. My workspace where I know where everything is and how it functions. I'll work there. You can send guards to protect the blooms if you're worried. I'll come, Aldrich said. To help. Mira looked at him, this vampire king who'd fought beside her in darkness, who'd been willing to die rather than leave her, whose mother sat before them holding hope in the form of a silver flower. You'll be a terrible assistant, she warned. I don't take direction well, and I'll probably boss you around constantly. I can live with that, Aldrich said. Then let's save your mother, Mira replied. The preparation took 3 days of meticulous work. Mira converted her shop into an alchemical laboratory, every surface covered with mortars, distillation equipment, and reference books. Aldrich proved surprisingly useful, his gardening knowledge translating well to the delicate process of extracting the Moonveil bloom's essence without destroying its properties. They worked 16-hour days, barely sleeping. The recipe required precision timing, each step coordinated with lunar phases and temperature fluctuations. Mira ground petals under the full moon, mixed them with moon water collected over 3 nights, added crushed minerals from the cave soil. The mixture had to steep for exactly 12 hours, no more or less. On the 3rd day, as dawn broke, Mira held up a vial of silver liquid that seemed to pulse with inner light. It's ready, she said. Are you sure? Aldrich asked. His exhaustion showed in the circles under his eyes, the tension in his shoulders. This is his mother's life, depending on Mira's knowledge and her grandmother's half-remembered stories. As sure as I can be, Mira admitted. Your mother's healers should examine it first. Test it for toxicity. We've done everything according to the instructions, but I'm a florist, not a physician. Aldrich took the vial carefully. Thank you, he said, for everything, for risking yourself, for working yourself to exhaustion, for caring about a woman you barely know. I know her well enough, Mira replied. She raised you, didn't she? That tells me everything I need to know about her character. The palace healers tested the Moonveil elixir thoroughly, subjecting it to every analysis they knew. Finally, the head healer, an ancient vampire with centuries of medical knowledge, declared it safe. The properties match historical records, she said. If Moonveil bloom truly cures wasting sickness, this preparation should work. But we've never actually tested it. There's no guarantee. There's never a guarantee, the Queen Mother said from her bed. She looked worse, her skin nearly translucent, her breathing labored, but doing nothing guarantees death. I'll take my chances. Mira administered the first dose herself, carefully measuring the liquid into a crystal glass. The Queen Mother drank it without hesitation, then lay back against her pillows. Now we wait, the healer said. If it works, we should see improvement within 24 hours. If it doesn't, she trailed off, the implication clear. Aldrich sat by his mother's bed, holding her hand. Mira started to leave, to give them privacy, but the Queen Mother stopped her. Stay, she said. Please. If this is my last day, I'd like to spend it with both my sons. Both? Mira asked, confused. The one I bore, and the one I'm choosing. The Queen Mother clarified, looking at Mira with those pale eyes. If Aldrich's finally learned to open his heart again, I want to see it. Mira stayed. They took turns reading to the Queen Mother from her favorite books, telling stories, simply being present. Aldrich was gentle with his mother, heartbreakingly so, holding her hand and smoothing her hair like she was precious and fragile. As afternoon faded to evening, something changed. The Queen Mother's color improved, barely noticeable at first, but gradually more obvious. Her breathing eased. When the healer checked her vital signs at midnight, she gasped. "The wasting has stopped," she announced. "Not reversed, not yet, but it's not progressing. The moon veil is working." Over the next week, the Queen Mother's improvement was undeniable. She sat up without help, ate solid food, walked her chambers without exhaustion. The healers called it a miracle. Mira called it proper application of botanical knowledge. The Queen Mother called it love made manifest. "You saved my life," she told Mira during one visit. "You and my son went into darkness and brought back light." "Thank the moon veil blooms," Mira deflected. "I just followed a recipe." "You followed your heart," the Queen Mother corrected. "The recipe was in your hands, but the courage to use it came from here." She tapped Mira's chest, above her heart. "And speaking of hearts, have you given my son an answer yet? About the proposal?" Mira asked. "The month isn't over." "The month is irrelevant," the Queen Mother said. "You've already decided. You went into the shadow caves together. You fought ferals back to back. You worked for 3 days straight to save a woman you barely knew because you cared about her son. Those aren't the actions of someone still deciding. They're the actions of someone who's already chosen but is afraid to admit it." "I am afraid," Mira confessed. "Of what?" the Queen Mother asked gently. "Of failing him. Of not being enough. Of being a florist pretending to be a queen." "You're not pretending anything," the Queen Mother said. "You're exactly who you are, and that's precisely what Aldrich needs. Not someone pretending to be royal. Someone real. Someone grounded. Someone who sees him as a man before a crown. That's rare beyond price." "But I don't know how to be a queen," Mira said. "Neither did I," the Queen Mother replied. "I was a flower seller from the market district. My hands smelled of dirt and fertilizer. The nobles despised me. The council tried to have the marriage annulled, but Aldrich's father loved me. And I loved him. And we learned the rest together." "How did you survive it?" Mira asked. "The politics? The expectations? The constant judgment?" "By remembering who I was before the crown," the Queen Mother said. "By keeping flowers in my chambers and dirt under my fingernails. By insisting my husband actually talk to me like a person instead of a decoration. And by choosing, every single day, to be brave enough to be myself even when everyone wanted me to be someone else." She squeezed Mira's hand. "You're already brave enough. You just have to choose to believe it." That evening, Mira found Aldrich in the palace gardens, the extensive grounds she'd envied during her first visit. He was working with a cluster of roses, carefully grafting new growth onto old rootstock. She watched him for a moment, this vampire king with dirt on his hands and concentration on his face, completely absorbed in the delicate work. He looked up, sensing her presence, and smiled. "Come to inspect my technique?" Mira asked. "I would have done it differently," she said, moving closer. "That cut's too shallow. It won't take." Aldrich laughed. "Always the expert." "In flowers, yes," Mira agreed. "In other areas I'm hopelessly confused." "What areas?" Aldrich asked, setting down his tools. "Love," Mira said. "Marriage, the terrifying prospect of saying yes to a man I've known less than a month but who somehow feels like he's been in my life forever." Aldrich stood, brushing dirt from his hands. "You don't have to say yes. I meant what I told you. I'm trying to earn your trust, not trap you into obligation." "I know," Mira said. "That's part of why I want to say yes. Because you're giving me choice. You'd let me walk away." "Would you?" Aldrich asked quietly. "Walk away?" Mira considered. Part of her wanted to. The safe part, the scared part, The part that had learned to protect herself by keeping expectations small, but another part, the part that had followed him into shadow caves and fought beside him in darkness, knew the answer. "No," she admitted. "I don't think I could. Not anymore." "Does that mean?" Aldrich started, hope lighting his eyes. "It means I'm saying yes," Mira interrupted, "to the courtship, to the continued getting to know you, to seeing where this impossible thing between us leads. I'm not promising forever. I'm promising I'll try. That's all I'm asking," Aldrich said. "Just try. With me. Together. Together," Mira agreed. Aldrich stepped closer, then paused. "May I kiss you?" Mira laughed, suddenly giddy with the enormousness of what she was choosing. "You fought ferals for me. You worked yourself to exhaustion preparing medicine. You've been nothing but patient and kind. Yes, you can kiss me." It was gentle, tentative, a question asked with lips instead of words. Mira answered by pulling him closer, by letting herself feel the reality of this choice. This man, this impossible possibility of happiness. When they broke apart, both slightly breathless, Aldrich rested his forehead against hers. "I don't deserve you," he whispered. "We've been over this," Mira replied. "You don't get to decide what you deserve. I do. And I've decided you deserve someone who sees you, really sees you, crown and all. That's me. I'm choosing that job." The formal announcement of their engagement came 3 months later, after what Aldrich called a proper courtship and what Mira called intensive royal training that made her head spin. The council had objections, of course. A human queen, they protested. Unprecedented. Unwise. "It will undermine our authority." "Good," Aldrich replied calmly. "Our authority has needed undermining for decades. Mira brings perspective this kingdom desperately needs." The council learned quickly that their king, once decided, was immovable. The public reaction was mixed. Noble vampires sneered at the poor florist elevated above her station. But the human population, the servants and workers and common folk who'd lived in shadows for generations, celebrated. One of their own, finally recognized. Finally seen. Mira kept her flower shop. She insisted on it, even when advisors suggested a queen shouldn't sully herself with manual labor. "This is who I am," she told them firmly. "I'm a florist who happens to be marrying a king. Not a queen who used to arrange flowers." The shop became something unexpected, a place where people could meet their queen on equal ground. Mira still served customers, still got dirt under her fingernails, still gave free flowers to the widow every Thursday. But now, when nobles came slumming for exotic human-grown blooms, they found their queen behind the counter. It forced a reckoning, made them see her as a person before a title. Slowly, uncomfortably, the kingdom began to change. The Moonvale blooms thrived in Mira's careful cultivation. She'd planted the extras they'd harvested from the shadow caves in the palace's deep gardens, creating a sustainable source of the healing flowers. The first year's harvest saved 17 vampires with wasting sickness. The second year, 53. Mira trained other botanists in the proper cultivation techniques, turning rare magic into accessible medicine. The Queen Mother, fully recovered, became Mira's staunchest ally in court. She taught Mira the intricacies of vampire politics, how to navigate council meetings, when to stand firm and when to compromise. But more importantly, she taught Mira that being queen didn't mean abandoning herself. "You're not here to become what they expect," the Queen Mother said. "You're here to show them what they've been missing by expecting so little." The wedding took place in spring, in the palace gardens Aldrich had cultivated for decades. Mira wore a dress she'd designed herself, simple green silk embroidered with flowers from her shop. She'd rejected the elaborate gowns the council suggested, the ones that would have made her look like every other vampire queen in history. "I'm not every other queen," she'd told them. "I'm me. That's what your king chose. Deal with it." She walked down the aisle alone, no one to give her away because she was giving herself, her choice, her decision. Aldrich waited at the altar in black and silver, his expression when he saw her a mixture of awe and joy, and something too deep for words. They exchanged vows they'd written themselves. Mira promised to see Aldrich, not his crown, to grow with him, not for him, to build a life that honored both who they were and who they were becoming together. Aldrich promised to never stop courting her, never take her presence for granted, never forget that she'd chosen him freely, and deserved that choice honored every day. The Queen Mother cried. Helena, captain of the guard and secret romantic, cried harder. Even some council members, ancient vampires who claimed they'd forgotten how to feel, seemed suspiciously moved. The reception lasted 3 days. Vampire tradition. But Mira and Aldrich slipped away after the first night, retreating to the deep gardens where moonveil blooms glowed in the darkness. They sat by the underground stream, just the two of them, no titles or expectations. Just Mira and Aldrich, a florist and a gardener who happened to wear crowns. "Thank you," Aldrich said quietly. "For choosing this. For choosing me." "You made it easy," Mira replied. "You showed me it was possible to be loved for who I am instead of who I should be." Aldrich took her hand, the gesture familiar now after months of careful courtship. "I have something for you. A wedding gift." He pulled out a small pot. Inside grew a single moonflower, the difficult plant she'd been struggling to cultivate when they met. "It's blooming," Mira gasped. "How?" "Moonwater and patience," Aldrich said. "And proper timing. Like some relationships." Mira laughed, then cried, then kissed him surrounded by flowers that bloomed in darkness. Beautiful because they refused to die easy. Aldrich had said that first night in her kitchen. He'd been talking about moonflowers. But Mira understood now he'd been talking about them. Two people who'd survived loneliness and loss, who'd learned to bloom despite the darkness surrounding them, who'd found each other and chosen to grow together. The moonveil blooms pulsed with gentle light, silver and strange, and alive. Above them, through cracks in the cave ceiling, starlight filtered down. Mira leaned against Aldrich's shoulder, feeling his arm around her waist, and thought about the terrified girl who'd rejected a strange man's proposal 4 months ago. She'd been right to refuse him then. They'd needed time, needed journey, needed to earn each other properly. But she was glad, so glad. She'd been brave enough to say yes when the time was right. Years later, when their story became legend, people would simplify it. The poor florist who became queen, the vampire king who fell in love with a human. But those who'd been there, who'd watched them work side by side in both flower shop and council chambers, knew the truth. It wasn't a fairy tale of transformation. It was a love story about two people who'd been brave enough to be exactly themselves, and wise enough to recognize that in each other. And in a kingdom that had forgotten how to see past titles and expectations, that was the rarest magic of all.